It is 3:47 inches the morning in Tel Aviv. The streets are empty. The Mediterranean breeze moves through the city like it always does, indifferent, ancient, unhurried. And then every phone in Israel lights up at once. Emergency broadcast, threat level 5. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Israel has never, in its entire modern history, issued a level 5 national alert. Not during the Yom Kippur War, not during the Gulf War, Scud barrages, not during any of the Gaza campaigns, not during October 7th, not during any Iranian missile salvo that has come before. Level 5 means the government believes mass casualty strikes are not just possible, they are incoming. Now ask yourself, what could push Israel to that threshold? The answer arrived 72 hours earlier in cargo manifests, in satellite imagery, in signals intelligence, so alarming that 3 separate CIA directors were pulled from their beds to review it simultaneously. North Korea had just completed the largest ballistic missile transfer in the history of modern warfare. 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles delivered to Iran. Operational, armed, aimed, and right now, in Washington, D.C., the lights in the Situation Room have not gone off in 4 days. Stay with me, because what you are about to understand will redefine everything you thought you knew about the balance of power in the Middle East, and what happens next will shock the world. Here is what we are going to cover in this video. We are going to walk through exactly what the Hwasong-31 is, why this specific missile, in these specific numbers, represents a fundamentally different kind of threat than anything Iran has possessed before. We are going to look at how this transfer happened, the logistics, the cover story, the route, and why Western intelligence missed it until it was already done. We are going to examine Israel's response, what Level 5 actually means operationally, what the IDF is doing right now, and whether the Iron Dome and Arrow systems can realistically handle a 2,000 missile salvo. We are going to look at the American panic, what the Pentagon is scrambling to deploy, what options are actually on the table, and why some senior officials are reportedly arguing that the window for a preemptive strike may already be closed. And we are going to zoom out to the bigger picture, because this isn't just about Iran and Israel. This is about a new axis of military cooperation between Pyongyang and Tehran that Washington has been warning about for years and failed to stop. And now the bill has come due. Before we go any further, stop what you are doing and look at the subscribe button. Not because I am asking you to do me a favor, because what you are about to watch for the next 40 minutes is the kind of briefing that used to happen behind closed doors, in rooms with no windows, in front of people with security clearances and 3 stars on their shoulders. This is the Jiang Report, and we do not do headlines. We do not do hot takes. We do not chase clicks by telling you the world is ending and then giving you nothing to hold on to. What we do, what this channel has built its entire reputation on, is follow the hardware. Follow the doctrine. Follow the decision-making chains. And then tell you, clearly, without flinching, what it all actually means for the world you live in. 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles just moved from North Korea to Iran. That sentence has been in the news cycle for 72 hours. And in those 72 hours, I have watched outlet after outlet either bury the story, misidentify the missile system, or worst of all, cover it in a way that generates maximum emotional reaction and minimum actual understanding. That is not what happens here. Here, we are going to tell you what the Hwasong-31 actually is, technically, precisely, in terms that give you a real picture of what 2,000 of them in Iranian hands means for Israel's air defense architecture and for American force posture in the region. Here, we are going to walk you through the intelligence failure that allowed this transfer to happen without being stopped, because understanding how this happened is just as important as understanding what happened. Here, we are going to look at the decision rooms, Tel Aviv, Washington, Tehran, what the people inside those rooms are actually weighing, what their options are, and what the next 72 hours could look like depending on which levers get pulled. And here, we are going to give you the global picture, because this is not just a Middle East story. This is a story about a new military axis between Russia, Iran, and North Korea that is reshaping the strategic landscape in ways that touch every part of the world, including the part you live in. That is the standard we hold ourselves to on this channel, every single video, every single time. So if you are not subscribed, do it right now. One tap. It costs you nothing. And it means that when the next major development breaks, and it will break, possibly before this video is even 24 hours old, you will be the first to know, and you will already have the context to understand it. Hit the bell, turn on all notifications, and share this video with someone who deserves to understand what is actually happening in the world right now. Because the story we are about to tell you is not one you can afford to miss. Let's get into it. The intelligence picture that has emerged over the past week is, by any measure, extraordinary. According to multiple reports, sourced from regional intelligence agencies and corroborated by commercial satellite imagery analysis, North Korea conducted a phased transfer of Hwasong-31 ballistic missiles to Iran over a period of approximately 6 weeks. The operation used a combination of overland routes through Central Asia, maritime shipments disguised as civilian cargo, and air transport through intermediary states that either looked the other way or were actively complicit. The total number confirmed or assessed with high confidence is 2,000 units. To understand why that number matters, you need to understand the context. Iran's existing ballistic missile arsenal, which is already the largest in the Middle East, numbers somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 missiles across all categories. A single transfer of 2,000 Hwasong-31s does not merely supplement that arsenal, it transforms it. It adds a new tier of capability that Iran simply did not possess before in terms of range, speed, payload, and most critically, survivability against interception. This was not a shopping trip. This was a strategic realignment. The timing of this transfer did not happen in a vacuum. Analysts point to a convergence of factors. First, the continuing degradation of Iran's domestic missile stocks from previous strikes on its launch infrastructure, attributed primarily to Israeli covert operations and the effects of multilateral sanctions on component supply chains. Second, North Korea's own strategic calculus. Pyongyang has been watching how Russian-supplied weapons performed in Ukraine, and more importantly, how Western air defense systems have struggled against saturation attacks. North Korea sees an opportunity to demonstrate the export value of its hardware, collect hard currency and oil, and bind Iran into a deeper strategic partnership that provides Pyongyang with geopolitical cover and a second front against American attention. Third, and this is the factor that the mainstream commentary keeps underplaying, Iran has a deadline. Tehran's leadership has assessed, based on its own intelligence, that a window of maximum Western distraction and political division exists right now. They intend to use it. This is the question that is currently burning through every intelligence community in the Western alliance. How did 2,000 ballistic missiles move across the world without triggering a red flag until the transfer was essentially complete? The answer is a combination of factors, none of them comforting. North Korea has spent decades developing a logistics infrastructure specifically designed to evade sanctions enforcement. They are very good at it. Cargo manifests are falsified at multiple levels. Shipping companies are layered behind shell corporations registered in jurisdictions with minimal oversight. Overland convoys travel at night, using civilian trucking routes, broken into small enough loads to avoid triggering the signature recognition systems that satellites are tuned to detect. Iran, for its part, was an active and sophisticated partner in this concealment. Its intelligence services have extensive experience in counter-surveillance operations. They knew exactly what signatures to suppress and when. And the West, frankly, had its attention distributed across too many simultaneous crises: Ukraine, Taiwan, the South China Sea, domestic political turbulence. Intelligence bandwidth is not infinite, and when you are stretched thin, things fall through the cracks. 2,000 missiles just fell through the cracks. Let's talk about what Level 5 means, because the phrase has been everywhere in the past 72 hours, and almost nobody is explaining it properly. Israel's National Emergency Alert System operates on a tiered scale. Levels 1 through 3 represent graduated states of heightened readiness monitoring, partial mobilization, restricted civilian movement in specific zones. Level 4 triggers full military mobilization and activates the national emergency broadcast infrastructure. Level 5 has never been activated in the modern state of Israel. Level 5 means the government has made a formal assessment that a mass casualty attack on Israeli territory is either imminent or already underway. It triggers mandatory civilian shelter protocols nationwide. It activates the full layered air defense network, Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow 2, Arrow 3 simultaneously. It puts the Israeli Air Force on immediate strike authorization, meaning pilots are in their cockpits, engines warm, awaiting the order rather than waiting for the order to get to their cockpits. And critically, Level 5 authorizes the IDF Chief of Staff to initiate counterstrike operations without requiring real-time cabinet approval under pre-delegated authority frameworks established after October 7th. Israel is not bluffing. The government of Israel does not issue Level 5 alerts for political theater. The intelligence assessment that triggered this decision was specific, sourced, and terrifying. 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles, operational, in Iranian possession, with launch preparation activity detected at multiple sites. The question that the IDF War Room is working through right now is not whether Iran intends to launch. The question is when, and whether Israel can act first. Let's talk hardware. The Hwasong-31 is North Korea's most recently confirmed intermediate-range ballistic missile system. It represents a significant advancement over earlier Hwasong variants in several critical dimensions. The Hwasong-31 is assessed to achieve speeds in the range of Mach 12 to Mach 15 during its terminal phase, the final portion of flight, when the warhead descends toward its target. At these speeds, the time window available for an interceptor missile to engage the incoming warhead shrinks dramatically. The Arrow 3 system, which is Israel's highest-tier interceptor designed for exo-atmospheric intercept of ballistic threats, has a demonstrated intercept envelope that was designed around earlier generation Iranian missiles with lower terminal velocities. The Hwasong-31 pushes against the edge of that envelope in a way that has not been operationally tested. Unlike older ballistic missiles that follow a predictable parabolic trajectory, the Hwasong-31 is assessed to incorporate maneuvering reentry vehicle, or MaRV technology. This means the warhead can alter its flight path during terminal descent. This is not a small tactical detail. This is the thing that keeps air defense engineers awake at night. Interceptors are calculated against a predicted impact point. A warhead that moves unpredictably forces the interceptor to chase a moving target in the final seconds of engagement, and in those final seconds, there is very little margin for error. The Hwasong-31 is capable of carrying a warhead in the range of 1 to 2 tons. In conventional high-explosive configuration, this represents a devastating strike capability against hardened infrastructure command bunkers, airfield facilities, port installations, urban infrastructure nodes. Iran is not known to possess functional nuclear warheads in deliverable form, but the conventional payload alone, delivered at Hwasong-31 speeds with MaRV accuracy, is a weapon of serious destruction. The Hwasong-31's assessed operational range puts all of Israel well within its strike envelope when launched from western Iran. This is not a borderline case. Every city in Israel, every military base, every port, every power station, all of it sits comfortably within range. Here is the fundamental challenge that 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles creates for Israel's air defense architecture and why American defense officials are genuinely alarmed. Israel's layered air defense system is impressive. It is arguably the most sophisticated integrated air defense network in the world. Iron Dome handles short-range rockets and artillery. David's Sling engages medium to long-range missiles. Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 handle ballistic threats at higher altitudes and longer ranges. But every one of these systems has an intercept magazine. There are a finite number of interceptor missiles loaded and ready at any given time. And there are a finite number of launchers, a finite number of radar tracks that can be processed simultaneously, and a finite number of firing solutions that the battle management system can execute in any given time window. The doctrine of saturation attack is built around one simple idea. If you throw more incoming missiles at a defense network than it has interceptors, some of your missiles get through. And against 2,000 Hwasong-31s, Israel's interceptor inventory, even with emergency resupply from the United States, faces an arithmetic problem that is very difficult to solve. Military analysts who work through the numbers using open source estimates of Israel's interceptor stockpiles and the Hwasong-31's terminal parameters arrive at a consistent and uncomfortable conclusion. In a full-scale 2,000 missile salvo scenario, even optimistic assumptions about intercept rates leave hundreds of warheads reaching their targets. Hundreds of Hwasong-31 warheads impacting Israeli territory is not a scenario that results in manageable damage. It is a scenario that changes Israel as a functioning state. That is why the Level 5 alert has been issued. That is why Washington is panicking. The Situation Room at the White House has been in continuous operation since the intelligence assessment was finalized and presented to the National Security Council. Senior officials who have spoken to reporters on background describe an atmosphere of controlled crisis, the kind of professional calm that masks genuine alarm underneath. The immediate American response has proceeded on several parallel tracks. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain and responsible for the Persian Gulf and surrounding waters, has been placed on its highest alert posture. Two carrier strike groups, the USS Gerald R. Ford Group and the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Group, have repositioned to operating areas that place their air wings within strike range of western Iran. Each carrier air wing brings approximately 70 combat aircraft, plus the Tomahawk cruise missile batteries, aboard the escorting destroyers and cruisers. B-52 strategic bombers from Diego Garcia have been placed on continuous airborne alert, a posture not seen since the Cold War. These aircraft carry both conventional precision-guided munitions and, under appropriate authorization, nuclear gravity bombs. Terminal high altitude area defense THAAD batteries are being surged to the region. Patriot PAC-3 batteries are being repositioned to cover critical Israeli and Gulf partner infrastructure. The State Department has initiated emergency contact with every state that may have had knowledge of or facilitated the transfer, including several that are nominally American partners. These conversations are described as extremely direct. The message is not subtle. If you knew and said nothing, there will be consequences. The UN Security Council has been convened in emergency session. The American ambassador has presented a portion of the intelligence picture enough to establish the factual basis for the transfer without revealing sources and methods, and has called for an immediate binding resolution, demanding Iran return or destroy the transferred missiles. Russia and China vetoed it within 4 hours. This is where the most significant internal disagreement within the American government is reportedly concentrated. A faction within the Pentagon and the National Security Council is arguing that the United States and Israel have a rapidly closing window to conduct a preemptive strike against the Hwasong-31 missiles before they can be dispersed, hidden, or launched. The argument is straightforward. 2,000 missiles sitting in identified storage and deployment locations is a targetable problem. 2,000 missiles dispersed across Iran's vast interior, hidden in tunnels and mountain complexes and urban areas, that is a problem that may not be solvable from the air. The counter-argument is equally serious. A preemptive strike of the scale required to neutralize 2,000 ballistic missiles, particularly given Iranian air defenses and the depth of the storage sites, would require a strike campaign of a magnitude that would constitute an act of war against Iran. The escalation risks are extreme. Iran has the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, through which approximately 20% of global oil supply transits. It has proxy forces positioned across Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, capable of simultaneous multi-front attacks. And the strike would need to be near perfect to actually work, because any missiles that survive would almost certainly be launched immediately in retaliation. The window for that decision, if it exists at all, is measured in days, possibly hours. America's Gulf partners, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, have been briefed and are quietly terrified. They are not the primary Iranian target in this scenario, but they understand very well that a major Iranian-Israeli war fought with Hwasong-31 missiles does not leave the Gulf untouched. They have their own Iranian missile exposure. They have their own critical infrastructure that sits within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. And they have American bases on their soil that would become targets the moment the shooting starts. Saudi Arabia has quietly activated its own Patriot batteries and is in emergency consultation with American forces. The UAE has similarly moved to heightened air defense readiness. Jordan and Egypt, both of which have their own complex relationships with the conflict, have made clear through back channels that they are not going to cooperate with any Iranian operation, but they are also not going to provide basing for a preemptive strike. Europe, for its part, is watching with a level of alarm that has not been seen since the early days of the Ukraine war. NATO has convened an emergency session. The primary concern from the European perspective is the oil shock that would follow any major escalation. Energy markets are already pricing in risk, and crude prices have moved sharply upward in the past 48 hours. Let's step back from the hardware and the geopolitics for a moment and ask a harder question. What does Iran actually want here? Because the Iranian leadership is not irrational. They are ideologically driven, strategically patient, and ruthlessly pragmatic about the relationship between military capability and political leverage. And the question of whether they intend to use 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles is not the same question as whether they intend to possess them. There is a school of analysis, serious, well-sourced, represented in some of the most respected strategic think tanks in Washington and Tel Aviv, that argues Iran's primary goal with this transfer is deterrence, not offense. The argument goes like this. Iran's leadership watched what happened to Iraq in 2003 and to Libya in 2011. And they drew a clear lesson, states, without weapons of mass destruction or overwhelming conventional deterrence, get regime changed. The acquisition of 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles is, in this reading, a deterrence move. A message to Israel and the United States: the cost of attacking us is now too high. There is another school of analysis that reaches a darker conclusion. This school points to the specific launch preparation activity that triggered Israel's Level 5 alert the movement of missiles from storage to deployment positions, the fueling activity at known launch sites, the communications intercepts, suggesting operational timelines rather than mere posturing. These are not the signatures of a state that acquired missiles to put them in a warehouse. The truth may be a combination of both. Iran's leadership may have acquired these missiles intending them as deterrence, while simultaneously preparing them for launch as a demonstration that the deterrence is real. The problem with this strategy, and it is a potentially catastrophic problem, is that it requires your adversary to correctly read your signals. And in a crisis environment, under information pressure and time pressure, with Level 5 alerts sounding and carrier groups repositioning and B-52s in the air, the margin for signal misreading is dangerously thin. Israel's strategic culture has one foundational principle that has remained constant across every government, every war, every crisis since 1000 1948. The Jewish state will not allow itself to be placed in a position of existential vulnerability without acting to eliminate that vulnerability. The Israeli public is, at this moment, frightened in a way that is qualitatively different from previous rounds of conflict. The October 7th attacks broke something in the Israeli national psychology, not the will to resist, but the assumption of security that allowed normal life to continue alongside the background hum of conflict. Level 5 has brought that break into sharp focus. But fear does not translate into paralysis in Israeli strategic culture. It translates into urgency. The Israeli government is under enormous domestic pressure not to negotiate, not to wait, not to rely on American diplomacy, but to act, to eliminate the threat. Now, before it becomes unmanageable, the IDF's top commanders have presented the cabinet with options. The options are not comfortable. None of them come without serious risk. But the alternative, waiting while 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles sit in operational configuration across the border, is a risk that the Israeli government appears unwilling to accept. The question of Israeli will is not in doubt. The question is whether the capability matches the will and whether the window to use it remains open. Zoom out far enough, and what you see is this. The transfer of 2,000 Hwasong-31 missiles from North Korea to Iran is not an isolated event. It is a data point in a pattern that has been building for years and has now become impossible to ignore. Russia, Iran, and North Korea have been moving steadily toward a de facto military alliance, not formalized, not announced, but real and operational. North Korean artillery ammunition has sustained Russia's war in Ukraine. Iranian drones have become a staple of Russian strike operations. Russian technology has flowed to Iran, and now North Korean ballistic missiles have flowed to Iran in quantities that suggest this is not opportunistic commerce, but strategic coordination. The implications extend far beyond the immediate Israel-Iran confrontation. For NATO, the Russia-Iran-North Korea axis represents a coordination challenge that the alliance's planning assumptions did not fully incorporate. If a major conflict erupts in the Middle East while the war in Ukraine continues, the demands on American military assets, interceptor stockpiles, carrier groups, strategic bombers, intelligence satellites become simultaneously acute in multiple theaters. The United States military is large, but it is not infinite. Simultaneous high-intensity commitments in Europe and the Middle East would create capability gaps that adversaries could exploit. For China, this crisis is an opportunity wrapped in a risk. Beijing has publicly called for restraint from all parties. Behind closed doors, Beijing is watching carefully to see how American military power performs under pressure, how U.S. allies behave under duress, and what lessons can be drawn for its own strategic planning regarding Taiwan. China does not want a catastrophic war in the Middle East. It would disrupt the oil supplies that China's economy depends on. But it has not been unhappy to see the United States tied down and strategically taxed. For global energy markets, the scenario is already beginning to bite. Oil prices have risen sharply since the intelligence about the transfer became public. If shooting starts, if Israel strikes Iranian missile sites, or Iran launches its missiles, or the Strait of Hormuz is threatened, the energy shock will be severe and immediate. Analysts are beginning to use words like 1,973 and 1,979 in conversations about what a sustained Middle East war would do to global oil supply. For the global non-proliferation order, the Hwasong-31 transfer represents a serious blow. The premise of the non-proliferation regime has always been that the export of advanced ballistic missile technology could be controlled through sanctions, export controls, and international inspection regimes. North Korea has now demonstrated at scale that a sufficiently determined proliferator can move 2,000 advanced ballistic missiles across the world without being stopped. That is a lesson that other potential proliferators in the Middle East, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, we'll study carefully. Let's be direct about the fork in the road. Path 1. Diplomatic and military pressure succeeds in creating enough uncertainty on the Iranian side that Tehran pulls back from active launch preparation, accepts some form of international monitoring arrangement, and the crisis de-escalates slowly, partially, without a clean resolution, but without shooting. This path exists. It is narrow. It requires Iran's leadership to conclude that the costs of proceeding outweigh the benefits, and it requires both the US and Israel to credibly communicate that those costs are real and immediate. Path 2. Israel concludes that the diplomatic path is either failing or too slow, and conducts preemptive strikes against Iranian missile sites. The Iranian response to Israeli strikes, with or without US participation, would be severe. Iran's surviving Hwasong-31s, plus its existing missile arsenal, plus Hezbollah in Lebanon, plus Houthi assets in Yemen, would all be activated simultaneously. The resulting conflict would be the largest military engagement in the Middle East since the 1973 Yom Kippur War, and potentially larger. Path 3. Iran launches first, either as a deliberate strategic decision or as the result of a miscalculation in the escalation dynamics. A 2,000 missile salvo against Israel would cause casualties and destruction at a scale that would force an Israeli and American response of a magnitude that would transform the regional order. None of these paths leads to a clean or comfortable place. The question of which one the world is about to go down is being decided right now, in rooms in Tel Aviv and Washington and Tehran, where people are working on very little sleep and very high stakes. Let's pause for a moment and step back from the noise. After everything we've just examined, the missile counts, the satellite tracking, the blaring sirens, the rapid military movements, the tension inside command centers, it's easy to get swept up in the velocity of events. Crisis has a way of pulling attention forward, forcing us to focus only on what comes next. But that instinct, while natural, often distracts from the more important question, not what happens next, but why does this matter to you right now, wherever you are? Because it does. The presence of 2,000 Hwasong-31 class ballistic missiles in Iranian hands is not simply a regional development. It does not belong only to the Middle East. It is not confined to the security concerns of Israel, even though that dimension is undeniably critical. What we are witnessing is something larger, a systemic shift. This is about the underlying structure of global stability, security frameworks, energy systems, economic confidence, and the balance of power that holds everything together. And that structure has already been disturbed. Look at the global oil markets over just the past 48 hours. Even without a single missile launch, volatility has surged. Prices react not only to action, but to credible threat. Now imagine escalation, real conflict, not speculation. Iran activates its full network of regional proxies. Pressure builds simultaneously across Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen. The Strait of Hormuz becomes uncertain, even temporarily. Shipping routes tighten. Insurance premiums spike. Supply chains begin to stutter. What follows is not abstract. Fuel prices rise. Transportation costs increase. Food becomes more expensive. Manufacturing slows. Fragile economies begin to strain under pressure they were never designed to handle. Governments already dealing with inflation, debt, and internal instability find themselves pushed closer to the edge. And populations, people like you, feel it directly in the cost of living, in job security, in the quiet anxiety that spreads when systems stop behaving predictably. This is the real cost. And it's important to understand something else. This disruption does not require a single missile to be fired. The mere existence of these weapons, deployed and operational, is enough. 2,000 advanced ballistic missiles in place, ready, accounted for within a strategic framework that alone is a destabilizing force of the highest level. It forces reactions. It compels military repositioning. It alters diplomatic calculations. It reshapes risk assessments across continents. It moves markets. It changes timelines. Deterrence itself becomes expensive. And then there is what this event proves. Because beyond the immediate implications, there is a deeper signal embedded in what has just happened. A precedent has been set, a nation under heavy sanctions. North Korea has demonstrated the ability to transfer a massive arsenal of advanced ballistic missiles across international boundaries. Not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. And it happened within weeks, without being effectively stopped by sanctions, without interception by export controls, without prevention by international monitoring systems, without timely disruption by intelligence networks that are supposed to detect and counter exactly this kind of activity. That matters, because every government in the world is watching. Every leadership group that has ever questioned whether it needs a stronger deterrent is paying attention. Every nation that has felt vulnerable, isolated, or strategically disadvantaged is now recalculating. The lesson being observed is simple, and it is powerful. The systems designed to prevent proliferation may not be as effective as once believed. And once that belief weakens, behavior changes. This is not just a military development, it is a message. And that message has already been received. So where does that leave us? At a moment of extreme tension, balanced on uncertainty, Israel is operating at the highest levels of readiness. Military assets are positioned, pilots are prepared, systems are active. The United States has moved key naval and air forces into place, signaling both deterrence and preparedness. Across the region, movements are being tracked, decisions are being modeled, contingencies are being updated in real time. And yet, no decisive action has been taken, at least not publicly. Tehran remains outwardly steady. Pyongyang is silent. Major global powers are observing closely, calculating their own positions, weighing risks that extend far beyond this immediate scenario. The reality is this: what happens next will not be determined by large groups or broad consensus. It will come down to a very small number of individuals, decision makers operating under immense pressure, with incomplete information and limited time. History has shown us something uncomfortable. Those moments do not always produce optimal decisions. Sometimes, events move faster than the ability of individuals to control them. Momentum builds, options narrow, timelines compress, and choices that shape the future of entire regions and sometimes the world are made within windows that are far too small for their consequences. That is why understanding matters, not to create fear, not to generate panic, but to see clearly. Because the version of events that most people receive is often delayed, simplified, or filtered. By the time it reaches mainstream channels, the critical window has already passed. The real dynamics, the ones that shape outcomes, are happening earlier, faster, and with more complexity than is typically communicated. And that gap between reality and perception is where risk grows. So the goal here is not alarm, it is clarity, to understand the scale of what is unfolding, to recognize the implications beyond headlines, to see how interconnected systems, military, economic, political, react to a single shift in capability. Because once you see that, the situation stops being distant. It becomes immediate. It becomes relevant. And it becomes something worth paying attention to. What comes next is uncertain. That is the truth. But uncertainty does not mean unpredictability. It means the range of possible outcomes is still open, and the decisions that will close that range are still being made. And we will continue to watch those decisions closely. We will continue to analyze what is happening beneath the surface. And we will continue to tell you what it actually means. Stay focused. Stay informed. Stay ready.